Well, the idea then was that innovation has always been probably the most important component in our 172 years in business. And at some point, about 10 years ago, we felt there was an untapped opportunity to get much more innovation from the outside. At the point, we were probably inventing everything in-house. There was probably 5% that would come from the outside. So our new CEO at the time, A.G. Lafferty, said, well, what if we set a bold goal to have 50% of our innovation come from the outside? And sure enough, 7 years later, 8 years later, about half of what we do is imported from a network of over 1 million contributors. And those are scientists, those are people from large, small industries, labs.
So is it something you could recommend that the CEO sort of set an objective? That was a bold thing to do. Half of our innovation will come from outside the company in 3 or 4 years.
I think it was a transformational opportunity for us, and the answer to your question is yes. I would recommend people should consider it. It requires a paradigm change, to use one of your words, in the mindset, in the culture, in the reward for the people working in the company, but also more importantly requires processes, because otherwise becomes a pretty loose confederation which doesn't yield the value that you would want, you would expect. So in a combination of processes and systems and framework, a mindset, I believe the results can be unprecedented.
What are the results?
Well, our starting with the real business results first, our business has doubled over the last few years, profitability 3 times over the last period. And as I said, over 50% of our innovation, some of that very, very creative, some of that coming from places which would be totally unsuspectable, then that did happen, so that did materialize.
How does it work in terms of you have all these chemists inside and scientists inside the boundaries? Why would they go outside? How did you set it up so that they might be incented to do that? What about the NIH, not invented here syndrome?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and that was probably the one single biggest barrier to overcome at the beginning. But if you focus on business results rather than rewarding innovation per se, then there is right there an incentive for people to take advantage of resources available to them in a variety of different ways. So in that respect, I think the cultural shift, if you wish, has happened pretty soon with the right reward system behind it. And then what we've done is to expand the same idea to a number of areas, not just product development from a consumer product standpoint, but we are also applying it a lot to my organization, where we apply the same philosophy to sourcing IT innovation or services, or so the same model. I mean, what I would like to offer here is that the same model can be reapplied, is reapplicable to a number of areas, which is, I think, what makes it very, very powerful.
So the internal people get compensated on the business results of the company more so than I found this molecule myself.
Completely. And that is a prerequisite which has always been there, but then also you need to create a number of surrounding human resources component which facilitated that. But absolutely, yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, I think at P&G, rather than NIH, they call it the PFE syndrome. Yeah, proudly found elsewhere. So just one more quick question. You mentioned about the process. I know you're very interested in the idea of creating a sort of agile, open organization, and you're very interested into these flow-to-work models as opposed to the traditional organizational silos that work. I mean, you're talking about messing with some very fundamental parts of the structure of the way organizations work. How far along are you on that?
I think we are not as far along as I would like, but we have made quite a bit of inroad over the last 2-3 years. Basically, the fundamental idea, the fundamental conviction I have is that the world is moving from big is good. So if you're big, you have an inherent competitive advantage, to agile is good and flexible is good. And now to a world where I think over the next 3 to 5 years, in my humble opinion, people who know how to network effectively with other organizations will be winning. So what we've tried to do is to make it systemic, and again, as always, is an integration of mindset, change, cultural reward system, and then processes and systems. And altogether, this create, I think, a very powerful change towards more of what I call an amoeba organization. So the idea is that people follow the work. People are not any longer limited by the organization chart they are in, but the priorities of our projects, of our initiatives, is what determines on the fly pretty much where people will follow the work. So we use this expression to describe what we are talking about.